US President Joe Biden wants to supercharge the semiconductor manufacturing sector with billions of dollars in aid. His proposal aims to help car makers that have had to slow production due to a shortage in silicon chips. Experts say the US needs the boost because demand for these components will continue to rise. Paolo Montecillo reports.
America's auto giants have had to slam the brakes on production this year. The industry is slowing down due to a shortage of the high-tech silicone chips that are at the heart of all modern cars. Most of the chips are made in China, giving it first dibs when supplies get thin.
For too long as a nation, we have been making the big, bold investments we need to outpace our global competitors. We've been falling behind on research and development and manufacturing. And put it bluntly, we have to step up our game.
President Biden is calling for a $50 billion investment in the semiconductor industry. It aims to bolster U.S. production by beefing up existing facilities and funding research.
Our view is that this is certainly something where we need to work closely with industry. We need to work closely with Congress, Democrats and Republicans. There's agreement on this issue being one that's impacting industries across the country.
That follows a forecast by the Alliance for Auto Innovation showing U.S. production could fall by around 10% this year due to the chip shortage. That's nearly 1.3 million fewer cars coming off the production line. Industry analysts say government help is welcome, and while the immediate impact will be minimal, the long-term benefits could be huge.
One thing to keep in mind is as cars become more sophisticated, we've talked a lot about electrification and autonomous technology, there are more of these chips needed. So I think it should be time where we start to think about these things.
The world's largest chip makers are ramping up their spending to meet that demand. Earlier this month, industry leader Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Corporation announced it's investing $100 billion over 3 years to increase production. And in the US, chipmaker NVIDIA has signed a deal with Volvo to provide components for its self-driving and electric cars. Its main American rival Intel is spending $20 billion to build 2 new factories in Arizona and will be boosting capacity at other facilities before the end of the year. That would allow its clients to restart their assembly lines and help US car production get back up to speed. Paolo Montecillo, TRT World.
Well, for more, let's go to Malcolm Penn in London. He's an expert on the semiconductor sector and the founder of the research and consulting firm Future Horizons. Welcome back to the program, Malcolm. Now, at this virtual meeting of executives from companies including General Motors, Ford, Google and Intel, Joe Biden was really selling his $50 billion plan to boost manufacturing and research in the semiconductor sector for the United States. How should that money be spent, do you think?
Well, the trouble is you can't have a short fix on this. So if you're really trying to solve the manufacturing problem, that's a long time scale project. So in the meanwhile, the money really should be spent more to encourage the chip manufacturers to want to make these circuits back in their homeland again. Because they've been offshoring it, you've really got to start to encourage them to want to reshore it back to the homeland again.
And I want to explain, or rather illustrate, just how complex the supply chain is when it comes to producing some of these advanced chips. I want to look at the camera image sensor chip that's supplied by a US firm for Hyundai. So production begins at a factory in Italy. The silicon wafers are then sent to Taiwan for packaging and storage. It's then sent to Singapore for storage and testing, then on to China for assembly, and finally to a component seller back in Korea before Hyundai actually gets its hands on it. So how realistic is it for the United States to be really fully self-sufficient when we've got such a complex production process?
Yes, pretty impossible. And it has been as diverse as this really since the beginning of the industry. For lots of reasons. Partly the reason was moving some of the production to lower cost areas, but the skill sets brought up there. But the food chain is long. I mean, you're talking about from actually starting to make the actual blank wafer itself through to it being fully processed is about a year. in time scale. So and the whole thing travels around the world a couple of times in between that there.
Yeah, so is it realistic for Joe Biden to at least attempt to build up US domestic capacity when it comes to these semiconductors?
Yes, I think it is. Manufacturing does matter. And I think that a lot of the value in the manufacturing is not so much in making the chip itself, but in the fact that it enables all of the products which we get used to and can't live without now. It enables them. And that's where the real economic value is. So if you do lose control of the supply chain, then you will lose control of the end product. Whether you need to make all of the constituents of the supply chain is another question, but certainly doing the patterning, the printing of the wafers itself, the so-called wafer fab process, which is what takes this 4 months, that's where the real IP is, and that's where you really should have control of that technology in your own country.
We know the chip shortage has so far forced Toyota to shut down production lines in China. Fiat Chrysler has been forced to stop production in Canada and Mexico, while Ford idled a factory in Kentucky in the United States. Can you just remind us, why has this chip shortage hit the auto industry particularly hard?
I'm not sure it has hit the auto industry. Well, maybe it has. Okay, the fact remains is shortages are part of the industry DNA. This is the 14th cycle. And they usually happen about every 4 to 6 years. But it's just we haven't had one since 2003. So everybody took their eye off the ball and forgot that shortages happen. And it's down to the fact that you can't forecast what production capacity you need that accurately the 2 or 3 years ahead before you need it. So it has affected every sector. I think it affected the auto industry more so than others because of their fascination with this just-in-time concept, where they think they can have pick up the phone and get the chips for the next couple of hours, and it doesn't work that way. The computer industry, the TV industry, all of those industries realize that you have to order 4 or 5 months in advance. But the auto industry didn't quite figure that out.
I see.
And their just-in-time just doesn't work.
Okay, Malcolm Penn from Future Horizons. It's always good to get your analysis. Thank you again.